Hello everyone, so I am back with a video series on class 9 science, the fundamental unit of life. So in this lesson, as always, we will focus on the concepts, we will not try to memorize anything and understand everything. So roughly some of the topics that we are going to cover in this entire lesson are introduction to cell, discovery of cell, structure of cell. We will start with cell membrane, cell wall, nucleus, cytoplasm and the cell organelles. Finally, we will do a quick comparison between plant and animal cells. And we will cover all of these in 5 videos in this entire video series. What is a cell? Cell is the building block of all organisms. Now, what do I mean by building block? Think of a building. What is it made up of? So, do you have a building made just like that over a day? Not really. It is made up of small units. For example, if you think of bricks. So, maybe bricks taken together, one after another, bricks when joined together, they gradually form that huge building. So, those bricks are the building blocks of the building. In a similar way, cells are our building blocks. And when we say that all organisms are made up of cell, all means all. Whether you think of a tiny insect or you think of a huge elephant or human beings or the birds, fishes, all of them, even the plants, they are all made up of cells. So in this lesson, we are going to learn about cell, how was it discovered, how does it look like, what is there inside a cell and all of that. So let's get started with an interesting story of discovery of cell. Somewhere around 1661, King Charles II of England ordered one of the scientists named Christopher to make some microscopes in order to get detailed view of different objects. Now this scientist Christopher gave this work to a young upcoming scientist who was just 26 years old and his name was Robert Hooke. Now Robert Hooke, being young and energetic, started putting in a lot of efforts and he ended up designing a microscope on his own. And with this self-designed microscope, he started observing a lot of things around him. And one fine day, he observed a cork under the microscope. So cork, it's made from the bark of a tree and it's like the lid of the bottle. And when he observed the cork, he found something very interesting. He could see a honeycomb-like structure with empty spaces contained by walls. And these empty spaces he called cells. So cell was discovered by Robert Hooke. So the pictures that you see here, this is the self-designed microscope by Robert Hooke and this is the honeycomb structure that he observed when he observed the cork. And these are the original pictures which Robert Hooke published in one of his books.
Then gradually came up many different scientists with many different theories, with many different proposals, and that gave rise to a vast knowledge on cells. So now we will talk about the evolution of the cell theory. So there was cell theory which was given in quite some time after cell was discovered. So let us see what was the cell theory. So when I talk of cell theory, so let us see how cell was gradually becoming popular or how cell was gradually getting known to people. Well, as I mentioned, in 1665, Robert Hooke discovered cell. Then somewhere around 1883, there was another scientist named Robert Brown who discovered nucleus in a cell. So you see the time gap, 1665 and then 1883, long time gap, right? So that means nothing got discovered very quickly, not at the spur of a moment. It was like Robert Hooke told that, okay, cells are there, but the detailed knowledge of cells came after a long time. So scientists took quite a long time to understand the structure, the composition, the different parts of a cell. So in 1883, Robert Brown told that inside the cell there exists a nucleus. And somewhere around 1839, a pair of scientists, Schleiden and Schwann, proposed the cell theory. So these two scientists together gave a cell theory. So what was that cell theory? I mean, what actually the cell theory told, that we will study here. Next, again around 1855, there was another scientist named Virchow who told that cells arise from pre-existing cells. That means from existing cells, new cells will arise. Again, from those new cells, newer cells will arise. So this process will keep going on. So that means cells will arise from cells only, right? So these were some of the improvements over the study of cell. Right, so here you can see that 1665 when cell was discovered for the first time. After that there was a long gap, but then again in the 1800s, that is 1833, then 1839, then 1855. So now gradually people were becoming successful in understanding cells. Right? Okay. So now let us look at the cell theory. What does the cell theory actually say? Now, cell theory says the first thing, that cells are the structural and functional units of life. So, what do I mean by structural and functional unit of life? So, when I say structural unit of life, that means the structure of the living organism. Life means any living organism. So, the structure of every living organism is made up of cells. The example which I told you, like each brick together, all the bricks together constitute the house. Similarly, all cells together actually construct the structure of a living organism. Therefore, cell is the structural unit of life. Now, functional unit of life means each cell performs a specific function. Now, all cells together performing some functions constitute the net function of the organism. For example, every living organism, let us take the example of human beings. There are so many functions which the entire body altogether perform. For example, the body has a digestive system which helps in digestion. There is another respiratory system which helps in respiration. There is another excretory system which excretes waste products from the body. There is a circulatory system which helps in blood circulation throughout the body. So if you look at the body as a whole, there are so many different functions which the body performs, right? Now, each of these functions are a result of the function which is performed by each cell. So the function performed by each cell, when considered together, gives us the net function performed by the entire living organism. So therefore, cells are known as the structural and functional units of life. So the next thing the cell theory told that was all organisms are made up of cells, be it plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, birds, whatever it is, every organism is made up of cells. All cells arise from pre-existing cells only. That means, it is not by some magic that cells come up. So cells arise from pre-existing cells. So these were some of the points which were given in the cell theory. So this cell theory, as I mentioned in the previous slide, was given by a pair of scientists, that is Schrieden and Schwann. Now let us look at the classification of organisms based on the number of cells. Now we broadly classify organisms, living organisms, into two categories: unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms. Now this classification is based on the number of cells present in an organism. So when I say unicellular, from the name itself you can guess what is unicellular. Uni plus cellular. So uni means one, cellular means cells. So that means organisms with one cell. Similarly, here you have multicellular. So multi means many. So organisms with many cells are multicellular organisms. So let us try to understand unicellular organisms and multicellular organisms with the help of few examples. So what are unicellular organisms? One cell constitutes the organism. That means in the entire body of the organism, there is just one cell. So that one cell alone constitute the structure of the organism. The one cell alone constitute the net function of the organism. So everything is dependent on just one cell, right? So in this case, single cell performs the basic functions that are characteristic of the organism. That means in this case, you don't have many cells. You don't have some cells to perform digestion, some cells to for ingestion, some cells for ejection. So you don't have those many cells, you just have one cell. So that single cell will perform all the basic functions required for the organism to survive. So you must be wondering, what kind of organism is it which has just one cell, right? So let us look at some of the examples of unicellular organisms. So the best example that I can give you now is amoeba. So what is amoeba? Are you aware of the name amoeba? Many of you would have heard of the amoeba gaming place. In most of the malls these days, you have amoeba game center, right, where you have a variety of games. So now here, the amoeba which we are talking about, it is a microorganism, right? Like when I talk of microorganism, the names which you are familiar with are bacteria, fungi, right? These kind of names you are familiar with, bacteria, virus, and all such things. So amoeba is also a microorganism. It is in fact a shapeless microorganism, and it falls under the category of protozoa. Now, I will not discuss in detail what is a protozoa, what is a bacteria, what is a virus now. For now, you should just know that all these are microorganisms which are extremely small and we cannot generally see them with our naked eye, right? So, in your higher classes, in class 11th, you will study about the animal family and the plant family in full detail. So, that time you will come to know the various properties, characteristics of each of these classes, right? So for now, you should just know that amoeba is a unicellular organism which has just one cell. So this is how an amoeba looks like, right? So the entire body of the amoeba just has one cell. So this entire thing is one cell, and this entire thing is an amoeba, right? So this amoeba is a shapeless, it doesn't have a fixed shape, microorganism which is a protozoa. Where do we generally find amoeba? It is generally found in marine regions, where you have water, or on the decaying bottom vegetation of freshwater lakes or ponds, right? Where you have if you go to the lowermost level of water in a freshwater lake or a pond, what do you see? You see there will be so many plants and such things which are getting decayed. So there also you see amoeba. So it is mostly found in marine regions. Now here it has got a single cell, and that cell decides the shape of the amoeba. So that cell changes its shape, the amoeba also changes its shape. So amoeba is an example of unicellular organism. So here the intake of food, the digestion of food, the excretion of food, all these functions has to be performed by the single cell. So the single cell is capable of performing the functions which are needed in due course of time. Right? Now let us look at the next example of unicellular organism, that is Chlamydomonas. So the names are tough, right? So that's how it happens in biology. You need to memorize tough names. There is no other option. So it is Chlamydomonas. So please pronounce it correctly. It is Chlamydomonas. Right? So what is a Chlamydomonas? It is again a microorganism. It is a kind of green algae. What is an algae? So when I talk of algae, you would have seen it in marine bodies, right? You would have seen this green colored grass-like structure which happens generally over the surface of water. You would have not only seen it in oceans and all, you would have seen it in ponds or small lakes and all nearby to your locality also, where you have a layer of green grass-like structure on the surface of water. Sometimes during the rainy season, you have these kind of algae even on your walls or even on the floors. Sometimes you do have it because of damping. Right? So Chlamydomonas are a kind of green algae, and here you can see the Chlamydomonas. Now see here, everything looks so big. The Chlamydomonas looks so big, the amoeba looks so big, but actually they are all microscopic organisms. But these pictures which are given here are the microscopic view. I mean, when they are viewed through a microscope, this is how they look like. So Chlamydomonas is again another example of a unicellular organism. Now, when you actually look at the cell structure of the Chlamydomonas, it looks somewhat like this. So here, so this is single cell. So this is just one cell. This constitutes the entire body of the Chlamydomonas. So inside this cell, you have a nucleus. You remember in one of the previous slides, I told that there was a scientist named Robert Brown who discovered that there is a nucleus inside every cell. right? So this is how the cell of a chlamydomonas looks like. So here I am not going to talk about the cell in detail because till now I have not discussed about the different parts of a cell. Once I do that, then you will be able to understand this also, right? So for now I will just go through the examples of unicellular organisms. The next example is a paramecium. What is a paramecium? It is again a kind of protozoa. So these are ciliate protozoa. What is ciliate protozoa? That means protozoa family with cilia. Cilia means these structures. If you see, there are small hair-like structures. So these hair-like structures are known as cilia. So since these kind of protozoa have cilia over their bodies, therefore they are known as ciliate protozoa. So paramecium falls under the category of ciliate protozoa. So where do we generally see paramecium? They are generally found in freshwater or marine environment or in stagnant ponds or basins. So mostly if you see, these kind of microorganisms are generally found in damp places, right? So they, as I said, they are covered with cilia, hair-like structures all over their body. They are also known as, paramecium is often known as slipper animalcule. So why are they known as slipper animalcule? Because of their appearance. So if you look at this picture, these are all paramecium. Now the parameciums look like a slipper, right? If you look at this, if I don't tell you that this is a paramecium, just by looking at the picture, you will get an impression of a slipper, right? So that is why they are also known as slipper animalcule. So in paramecium also, you just have one single cell, and that single cell performs all the basic functions needed for the survival of the paramecium. The next unicellular organism is a bacteria, a name which is quite common to you. You would have often heard of bacterial infection, or you would have often heard your mom asking you to wash your hands before you have your food because there might be some bacteria in your hand, right? So bacteria again is a kind of microorganisms. They come in variety of shapes and sizes. So this bacteria was one amongst the very first life forms on earth. When life just started existing on earth, so bacteria was one of those first life forms on earth. So where do we generally find bacteria? They are generally found in soil, water, or acidic hot springs. They also live in plants and animals. As I said, we often have bacterial infection, right? So bacterial infection means that particular organ is infected with bacteria. That means bacteria is residing in our body. Correct? That is how that object is getting infected. For example, you sometimes might have bacterial infection in your teeth. What does that mean? Bacteria is living in your teeth. So that is why it has bacterial infection. So many times bacteria live in the body of plants or animals, right? So here if you look at this picture, this again shows the microscopic view of a bacteria. Now in bacteria, as on the figure on the right hand side, you can see that there are so many different shapes of a bacteria. It can be spherical, it can be of elongated shape, it can be oval-like structure, or it can be a small structure with a tail. So there are many different shapes and structures of bacteria. So here it shows the microscopic view of a specific type of bacteria. How does it look like under the microscope? So these were some of the examples of unicellular organisms where the organism is made up of just one cell, and that single cell performs all the basic functions of that organism. Right? So many cells constitute these organisms. That's quite obvious. Multicellular, that means many cells. So many cells are present in this organism. So there is a division of labor in multicellular organisms. What do we mean by division of labor? That means the work is divided between different cells. For example, let us take this example. Let us suppose you have 10 people to work on a project, right? Now, in that project work involves so many different things. Maybe first you have to, let us suppose you have to construct a house and you have got 10 laborers with you, right? So what do? You actually divide the work among 10 of them. You ask 2 of them to get water. You ask the remaining 2 to carry the cement and all from one place to another. You ask the other 2 to start digging the ground. So similarly, you can divide the work amongst different people, then what will happen? Many different types of works will happen simultaneously, right? So in a very similar fashion, in multicellular organisms, there is a division of labor. That means some cells perform a specific functions, few other cells perform some other function, again another group of cells perform some other function. So that is how the cells perform their function. So there is division of labor in multicellular organisms. Now, some organisms have cells of various kinds. So it is not necessary that one organism will have same type of cells throughout its body. Sometimes it also happens that one organism has many different types of cells. The example of such organism is human beings. In human beings, in all of our body, what do we see? Somewhere we have somewhere near the brain we have the nerve cells. Somewhere in the kidney we have the kidney cells, and those cells are not similar to each other. They look different. Their functions are also different, right? So sometimes it also happens that one organism has many cells and the cells are of different kinds. So let us look at the example. The first example and the best example that comes up in our mind is human beings. So in human beings, just look at the variety of cells you have. We have smooth muscle cells, we have blood cells, we have nerve cells, we have fat cells, we have bone cells. So just look at the variety which you have and just look at their appearance. Their appearance are also different, right? So the appearance of a bone cell, if you look at this cell, it is a flowery structure, right? So the appearance of a bone cell is so very different from the appearance of a blood cell or from the appearance of a smooth muscle cell, right? So, however, the organism is just one organism, but the variety of cells which are present in the organism is different, right? And each of these cells have a specific function to perform. For example, the function of the bone cell and the blood cell are not the same. Similarly, the function of a fat cell and a nerve cell is not the same, right? So that is how the structure is, in a multicellular organism. So the most important thing in a multicellular organism is division of labor. Okay. So now that we are clear with what are unicellular and what are multicellular organisms, let us now try to see what is a cell made up of. So till now we saw that, okay, cells are the structural and functional units of every living organism. Now let us look at the structure inside one cell. So let us now concentrate only on a single cell. We will see what is it made up of. So a cell is made up of components called cell organelles. So even inside a cell, you have different components, and these components are known as cell organelles. Now, how was it first observed that cell is also made up of cell organelles? So a cell is able to live and perform all its functions because of these organelles. And see, even if a cell is performing some function, it will not happen magically, right? So a cell consists of different components called cell organelles. Now these cell organelles each perform a specific function. So the functions which are performed by each of the cell organelles together make a cell to live and to perform its functions. All cells have the same organelles irrespective of their function and organism they are found in. That means whether it is a nerve cell or a bone cell or a blood cell, whatever cell it is, the cell will have the same organelles. That means the components of the cell will remain the same even if the cell types are different or the cells are present in different organisms. Let us suppose a cell inside a human being and a cell inside any other animal, for example, elephant, right? The components or the cell organelles will remain the same inside both the cases, whether it is the cell inside an elephant's body or a cell inside a human's body. The cell organelles will still remain the same. So that means the structure of a cell basically remains more or less the same in all organisms, right? So now in this lesson we will concentrate or we will study in detail the structure of a cell. We will talk about all the cell organelles which make up a cell. So what are the different organelles present in a cell? So here we have given a picture which gives an idea about the various organelles. So the organelles which are present are nucleus, and inside every cell you have a nucleus. So here this numbering actually tells us where these organelles are present. So right now I'm not concentrating much on describing each of them because we will discuss each of them in detail in the later slides. So the next one is ribosomes, vesicles, rough endoplasmic reticulum, Golgi apparatus, cytoskeleton, smooth endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria, vacuole, cystosol, lysosome, centrioles within centrosome, and cell membrane. So these are the various cell organelles. That means these are the various components of a cell. And this picture actually gives us an idea of how a cell looks like. So inside cell you have so many different components arranged in this fashion.
I hope you found the video useful and this would have given you a fair idea about what is a cell. Now in the next video, we are going to learn about the structure of a cell and we will start with the cell membrane and the cell wall. And this is going to be very important and very interesting as well. So stay tuned.